Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. The Secretary General of EUROTOX, Professor Mark Ballardy, is having some difficulties in entering the Zoom. So we will start. I will introduce myself, and then I will share my presentation and start with it. So my name is Félix Carvalho. I am pharmacist by training. I'm graduating in pharmaceutical sciences. I have a PhD in toxicology by the Faculty of Pharmacy, University of Porto in Portugal. I'm presently a full professor at the same faculty, the head of the toxicology laboratory, the director of the biological sciences department. I am also the president-elect of EUROTOX, International Union of Toxicology, and the president of the North Regional Section of the Portuguese Order of Pharmacists. And I was previously president of EUROTOX. I'm a former president of EUROTOX and also former president of the Portuguese Society of Pharmacology. I'm a numerary member of the Academy of Pharmaceutical Sciences in Portugal, external expert of the European Medicines Agency, and member of the Committee for Evaluating Medicines at the National Authority of Medicines and Health Products, INFARMED. I'm also member of editorial board of several scientific journals. My main area of research is toxicology, and besides global warming, I have a special interest in evaluating mechanisms of toxicity of xenobiotics, let's say drugs of abuse, pesticides, toxins, and the respective development of antidotes. During the past 35 years, I've published over 600 scientific articles and book chapters, and I am co-editor of 3 Portuguese books in the area of toxicology: Forensic Toxicology, Fundamental Toxicology, and Food Toxicology. I will now share my presentation. I hope you can all see it. Okay, and oops, I did something that, okay. It's in the end. So my presentation will One Health in a Warming World. A toxicologist's perspective. It will be my perspective as a toxicologist. And of course, I have to start with the concept of One Health. One Health is integrated unifying approach that aims to sustainably balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and ecosystems. And according to several organizations, between them the WHO, the UN Environmental Programme, and FAO, the approach should be to promote the well-being and address threats to health and ecosystems while simultaneously responding to the collective needs: clean water, energy, air, as well as safe and nutritious food, and taking actions against climate change, which will be the subject of my presentation today, contributing obviously to sustainable development. And we can link the One Health approach to toxicology and toxicologists. Let's see what happens in EUROTOX mission. EUROTOX mission is to foster science and education of toxicology and influence regulatory and policy frameworks to promote the safety of humans, animals, and the environment, and protect global health. Related to this, EUROTOX, in which I am the president-elect at the moment, we have a vision to foster international scientific cooperation for the global acquisition and utilization of knowledge in toxicology for improvement of the health of humans and their environment. My friends, this is One Health under the perspective of the toxicologists. And this is well aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, which are common universal goals for the member states of the United Nations to transform the world into a fairer, more prosperous and peaceful society until 2030. This was adopted in September 2015 as a successor to the Millennium Goals. And among all these sustainable development goals, there is one that is very important, number 13, which is climate action. Now, there is an organization, the World Meteorological Organization, that every year publishes a report. And the last report is this one from 2025. In which there are some numbers that are very important, some indicators. And in this report, it is mentioned that in 2024, the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, which has been steadily increasing along the years, reached its highest levels in the last 2 million years. Also, the levels of methane and nitrous oxide, two other greenhouse gases, reached their highest levels in the last 800,000 years. And just to remember you, what is the greenhouse effect about? When the Earth receives solar energy, this comes into as shortwave solar radiation that passes through the atmosphere and warms the Earth. Then the Earth emits infrared energy as long-wave infrared radiation upwards. Then if we have in the atmosphere these greenhouse gases, they will absorb the infrared energy through vibration. They become in vibrational mode and then can return this energy to everywhere and also to Earth, causing additional warming. And because of this effect, the climate indicators tell us that the global average surface temperature was 1.55 degrees centigrades above the average for the period of 1850 to 1900. And it also mentions that 2024 was the hottest year in 175 years of recorded observations, and that the year of 2025 was the second warmest year in this period. And if we look at these sustainable development goals that are linked to this rise in surface temperature, you can see that there are changes in biodiversity and also losses, decline in agriculture and fishing fields. There will be water scarcity, displacement, built infrastructure degradation, permafrost thawing, increased greenhouse gas release and aggravation of the effects, global health issues, food insecurity that will then be affecting many other sustainable development goals. So it is all linked when there is an increased temperature of the surface. But not only the surface of the globe is increasing in terms of temperature, but also the ocean heat content. According to the same report, the rate of ocean warming over the past 2 decades was more than twice than that observed over the period of between 1960 and 1970. And again, there is a relationship between the increasing temperature of the ocean and many other effects in terms of One Health. There is higher greenhouse gas concentration and greenhouse effect, eutrophication and algae bloom, natural heritage loss, deoxygenation, there will be barriers to nutrient content, biodiversity changes and losses, and again, several development also will be affected. But the great concern here is not a small increase in temperature of the bodies, of the surface of the ocean water, but is heat waves. Heat waves are really increasing, becoming more frequent, more intense, and longer in many regions due to climate change. Heat waves are defined as a period of unusual hot weather in comparison to normal for a given location that lasts for at least several days. And according to WHO, for the periods of 2000 to 2019, around 20 years, studies show approximately 500,000 related deaths each year globally, with 45% of these in Asia and 36% in Europe. And I will like to call your attention to another report that was recently published. It was published last April in Lancet, which is the 2026 Europe report of the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change. According to this report, health-related risks are accelerating across Europe. 99.6% of monitored European regions showed increased heat attributable mortality in the recent years compared to the previous ones. And there is an estimated over 62,000 heat-related deaths in 2024 just in Europe. Looking at media, we can find easily news about these effects. These are news from yesterday and today from Reuters. Yesterday, Reuters was publishing that Spain attributes over 1,000 excess deaths to it in second hottest June ever. So this is related to this month. And this is news from today, also from Reuters, saying that the European is really affected by these heat waves. And you can see here 45 degrees in Madrid today. Also, The Guardian mentioning that European heat wave is worst ever and impossible without climate crisis. This is related to June this year. And also Le Monde is mentioning mortality over 1,000 deaths just during this last heat wave in June. And this is some news from Turkey, Istanbul, mentioning that people with cardiovascular diseases have an increased risk of death of about 53.4%, and those with respiratory diseases about 40% during heat waves. So there are a few groups within the population that can be more affected. And these cardiovascular diseases are extremely important. And why? Because heat waves have a great impact on cardiac parameters. There is an increase in cardiac output, an increase in heart rate, a decrease in preloads, a decrease in afterload, and also an increase in systolic function and inotropy. This can rapidly lead to a higher risk for cardiac arrhythmias than with tachycardia, bradycardia, and arrhythmia that can lead to death. Again, in terms of cardiovascular risk, there is also an impact of heat waves on vascular parameters. The disruption of blood vessels dynamics increased, that can lead to myocardial infarction. Blood viscosity increase, that can lead to thromboembolic disease. A decrease in blood pressure, that can lead to sync due to hypotension. An increase in cutaneous vascular volume, that can lead to cardiac arrest. Decrease in splenic renal volume, that can lead to acute kidney disease. So all vascular parameters that can be affected, leading also to death risks or severe illnesses. And in this more or less complex slide, what I want to show you is that there is a complex interaction between thermal stress, cardiovascular function, metabolic function, and renal function. When there is thermal stress, which is linked to hypercoagulability and dehydration and increased skin blood flow, this can lead to a decrease in gut blood flow, then leads to an increase in epithelial membrane permeability in the gut, that can result in higher absorption of endotoxins, lipopolysaccharide, for instance, which can result in systemic inflammatory response syndrome and multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. Then can lead to consumptive coagulation, venostasis, and etc. Also, dehydration can also lead to a decrease in extracellular fluid and decrease in glomerular filtration rate, that can result in acute kidney injury. Also, sweating and increase in vasopressin secretion can have metabolic consequences, increase the consequences of obesity, and also increase serum glucose, that can lead to renal dysfunction, urinary tract infection, urolithiasis as also a consequence. So this is all linked, and once we affect one of these parameters, the others will be also affected as a result. Climate change also induces a higher risk of wildfires, and wildfires can affect the health systems, can have toxicological effects, direct toxicological effects, and also affect healthcare systems. So there is an increase of wildfire risk with higher temperatures, prolonged droughts, dry vegetation, and during heat waves, strong winds that are associated. This can lead to direct health impacts, increased respiratory diseases, asthma, COPD, cardiovascular events, injuries and mortality, and also exposure to toxic smoke. I'm mentioning here the particulate matter below 2.5, and this is a great impact that we can have from wildfires. But this can also lead to an impact on healthcare systems. This is a toxic effect. Damage to infrastructure, disruption of healthcare services, increased emergency demands during wildfires. Consequences that this can have in medicines is that there is a disruption of medicine supply chains, reduced access to essential medicines, increased demands of inhalers and oxygen, and also a great risk for cold chain products like vaccines or insulin and others. This can also have a great impact in the health of people. But we have also to look to these wildfires in a more toxicological point of view. So during wildfires, there is a combustion of vegetation, soil, and infrastructure, and also generation of toxic residues and ash. So during wildfires, contaminants are released: polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, volatile organic compounds, heavy metals, and also persistent combustion byproducts. Then what happens after the wildfires? Then when we have post-fire rainfalls, so there is the risk of runoff from burned areas. So the rainfall produces rapid runoff over hydrophobic soils, limiting infiltration. There also an effect in terms of leaching ash and contaminated soil. So the water percolates through ash and burned soils, dissolving nutrients, heavy metals, and other contaminants. And also there is an increased erosion and sediment transport. So there is the runoff increases the erosion, mobilizing ash and sediments into streams and rivers. So there are potential toxicological consequences from that. Toxic exposure risks, ecological damage, increased water treatment needs, and also threats to public health. So the water resources are affected, rivers and reservoirs, drinking water sources and groundwater aquifers will then affect animals and humans. Another point that is very important when we speak about climate change and extreme weather events is that when we have warmer atmosphere, we have increased evaporation and also a greater atmospheric instability. This global warming will intensify the water cycle, and this leads to stronger thunderstorms, extreme rainfall, and increased flooding that we have been witnessing more and more during the last years. In Portugal, for instance, we had this storm called the Storm Christine that also affected other parts of Europe. The peak impact was in January, 28th January this year. There was an explosive cyclogenesis with a sting jet hurricane force wind gusts with over 200 kilometers per hour locally. There was an extensive forest damage, power outages, flooding, and infrastructure disruption. And it was, in fact, one of the most damaging storms to affect Portugal in recent decades. So these extreme weather events can threaten access to medicines, and this is also toxicology. Extreme weather events may disrupt manufacturing and transport, damage logistics and medicine distribution. It can threaten, as I already mentioned, for wildfires, the cold chain medicines like vaccines, insulin, and also biologics, and can increase shortages of critical medicines and reduce patient access during the emergencies. So thinking about this, the European Medicines Agency has already issued a regulatory response by creating an executive steering group on shortages and safety of medicinal products that immediately reached the conclusion that there is a need for resilient medicine supply chains capable of withstanding major disruptive events, including those increasingly associated with climate-related crises. Another issue about climate change is tropical vector-borne diseases. There is a northward spread of this type of vectors that can spread a lot of diseases that were not in Europe before. Rising temperatures, milder winters, and changing rainfall, in fact, increase the suitability of temperature regions for vectors such as mosquitoes and sandflies. And tropical diseases that were once confined to warmer climates are increasingly detected in Europe and other temperate areas. We can now see the spread of Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti as vectors that are raising the risk of local transmission of dengue, chikungunya, and Zika. So, and also another point that I need to raise here is that the climate warming also lengthens the transmission seasons and facilitates the outbreaks of immunologically naive populations. Coming again to the news, The Guardian has this one in 2024, in which it mentions that mosquito-borne diseases are spreading in Europe due to climate crisis. And this is not coming from the news. Coming again to the Europe report of the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change, it is mentioned that climate-sensitive diseases are expanding geographically. Dengue transmission suitability increased almost 300% in Europe. West Nile virus outbreak risk is also rising substantially. So we need to think about this. And according to the director of the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, we need to think about protective measures combined with vector control measures, early detection of cases, timely surveillance, further research, and awareness-raising activities, which are paramount in those areas of Europe that are most of risk. I will call your attention for these vector control measures that are mentioned here, because in many cases, the pesticides that we have to use to control these vectors are not enough or are not have not the potency that is required to eliminate them. So we need to look at this vector control program that is already being used in countries where the vectors are widespread. And we must remember that, for instance, DDT that was banned in most areas of the world is still used in countries that are infested by these mosquitoes. And this can lead to something that we need to remember again, which is the use of pesticides, persistent pesticides, and the grasshopper effect. So let's go step by step. So we have climate change, expansion of vector-borne diseases, increased vector ground control is required. So we need to reconsider persistent pesticides for vector control. Probably it will happen in the future. We need to be prepared for that. And the use of the persistent pesticides in Europe can affect other parts of the globe due to this grasshopper effect. The grasshopper effect is means this. It can have, it's like a jump of the grasshopper. Less volatile compounds move to the evaporation, to the atmosphere, and then the deposition cycles. This is a jump, a grasshopper jump. And then we can also bigger jumps for more volatile compounds that evaporate in warm regions and move far distances before condensing in colder regions. So the northern hemisphere will be affected if we use those persistent insecticides in places like Europe. I would like to raise your attention also for the exposome effect. The exposome is the totality of human exposure to the environment since conception and complementing the genome, and will stay with us for all of our life. And we have a general external exposome and a specific external exposome. The specific is the diet, water, physical activity, behavior, the drugs that we take, etc. The pollutants to which we are exposed, etc. And the general external exposome, among the other factors, we have here climate. So climate is definitely very important for the exposome. And if we think about the cocktail effect of the exposome, in which it is very easy to explain, there are several factors to which we are exposed, which individually are not enough to affect our health, but when combined, this can have significant effects. And we must remember that hyperthermia, increase in body temperature, can be a very strong factor leading to the exposome effect. Speaking about combinations, it is important also to mention the potential toxicity of medicines under a hot environment. There are drug classes that can lead to different effects and higher toxicities when in a heat environment. For instance, anticholinergics, beta blockers, antihistamines, phenothiazines, vasoconstrictors can interfere with sweating and increase body temperature. Digoxin, lithium, warfarin, antipyletics can, the levels of these drugs can be affected by dehydration that can occur in a heat environment. Acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, butyrophorone, can decrease thirst, which is very adverse effect that is very, very important for the elderly people. Diuretics, alcohol, antibiotics can lead to dehydration and electronic imbalance in the heat environment. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, sulfonamide, cyclosporin, can induce reduced renal function. Vasodilators, calcium channel blockers, antihypertensives will aggravate heat illness. Also calcium channel blockers, alpha-adrenoceptor agonists, they will interfere with subcellular heat shock proteins levels and activities. And last but not least, antipsychotics and serotonergic agonists will interfere with thermoregulation. I have a good example for this serotonergic agonist effect, which is mediated by ecstasy or methylene methamphetamine. It's a drug of abuse that can increase body temperature. And we made some experiments in our group some time ago in which we treated mice with ecstasy at normal and high temperature. And we looked at the effect in the liver. This, you can see the histology of the mice liver in a hot environment without any type of treatment with drugs. This is the saline control at 30 degrees. Then, if you look at the effect of ecstasy, 20 milligrams per kilogram at 20 degrees, you can already see some pycnotic nuclei, but nothing serious. But then when we put the animals at 30 degrees, there is a strong effect in the liver. We can see here vacuolation, presence of blood clots, and loss of typical hepatic cords organization. And these animals had an increased body temperature as well that I'm not showing here. There is also a combination of effects, a synergism of global warming and air pollution. You can see here a chain reaction that is occurring with greenhouse gases that lead to greenhouse effects that then can lead to climate changes. These climate changes with forest fires, storms, and also the ground level of ozone lead to increase of air pollutants and also water pollutants. Then this will again increase the quantity of greenhouse gases, and this is a chain reaction that we must take into account as well in terms of toxicology. Another important point is the synergic effects of extreme heat and aeroallergens. Then when we have an increased heat, there is an increase in the quantity of aeroallergen, pollens, spores. Then combined with air pollutants, there is an enhanced allergenicity with a pro-inflammatory and immunomodulatory effect that then increases the risks of allergic respiratory diseases like asthma, rhinitis, etc. Another work performed by our group relates the effects of climate change and the pollution by microplastics and heavy metals. Environmental contamination with lithium from lithium batteries, which with the automobiles with lithium batteries is increasing, and also from microplastics has been steadily increasing. And this trend is expected to continue in the future. And therefore, many freshwater species are particularly vulnerable to lithium and microplastic contamination and other pressures. We looked at one sentinel species, which is Daphnia magna, and we observed that both lithium and microplastic decreased Daphnia magna growth and reproduction. And in some concentrations, there is a synergistic interaction between lithium and microplastic. But what I want to show you is that warmer water, and this is a second study, just increasing 5 degrees in the water and also high light intensity, it increased the toxicity of lithium and the mixtures of lithium and microplastics to these species, especially in the reproductive toxicity. Another effect of climate change is water scarcity. So we must, as toxicologists, be aware of dehydration and the dehydration effect in terms of toxicity. According again to the report that I mentioned in Lancet, global warming is already worsening water scarcity and related health risks across Europe. And there are many points about global warming and water scarcity. There are more droughts due to rising temperatures, large parts of Europe are already affected in the last decade when compared with the previous one. 65.2% of European regions experienced extreme to exceptional summer drought, and 68.5% of regions saw longer drought duration. So these prolonged water deficits can increase the risk of waterborne diseases, food insecurity, cardiovascular diseases, respiratory illness, mental health disorders, and obviously mortality. Looking with some more specificity to dehydration effects, they can potentiate the toxic effects of several toxic xenobiotics. When we have reduced plasma volume, there is an increased xenobiotic concentration. So drugs or toxins that are normally diluted in the body fluids can reach toxic concentrations more rapidly under dehydration. Impaired renal clearance. Several xenobiotics can become nephrotoxic more easily when hydration is low because their clearance decreases while the local concentration in renal tubular cells increases. And hepatic metabolism is also altered. So there is a decrease in hepatic blood flow and oxygenation that will impair phase 1 and phase 2 metabolic pathways, especially those dependent on cytochrome P450 activity, glutathione conjugation, or glucuronidation. There's also, due to dehydration, increased oxidative stress. The antioxidant defenses becomes compromised, making tissues more susceptible to oxidative stress. There is a disruption of electrolyte and acid-base balance, so it leads to hypernatremia and metabolic acidosis. So changes in pH can alter xenobiotic ionization and distribution, and exacerbate mitochondrial dysfunction caused by certain toxins. Tissue hyperperfusion and hypoxia that will lead to lower circulation volume, then reduced perfusion of liver, kidneys, and also brain. And finally, enhanced key absorption in renal tubules. The kidney conserves water by increasing tubular reabsorption, and therefore lipophilic xenobiotics can be reabsorbed back into circulation, delaying elimination. So climate change is also linked to food scarcity. So fasting malnutrition is also a toxicological effect of climate change. And according to the Lancet report, climate change is emerging as a driver of hunger, poor nutrition, and health inequality in Europe. Climate change is already affecting food and nutrition security across Europe, mainly through the growing frequency of heat waves and droughts, which reduce agricultural productivity, disrupt supply chains, and increase the price of fruit and vegetables. For instance, in 2023, the climate change led to over 1 million additional people in Europe that are experiencing moderate severe food insecurity versus the previous baseline. And each increased heat wave days was associated with 1.05 percentage points in food insecurity, and each additional drought month was associated with 0.62 percentage points in this food insecurity. And we must remember as toxicologists that malnutrition can potentiate the toxic effects of xenobiotics. For instance, there is the depletion of detoxification factors. Many phase 1 and 2 detoxification reactions require vitamins, amino acids, and energy substrates. And food scarcity reduces their availability, leading to impaired conjugation and detoxification. The altered xenobiotic metabolism is also a reality. So there is a downregulation of cytochrome P450 enzymes and phase 2 conjugating enzymes. There is an increased lipid mobilization and redistribution of lipophilic xenobiotics. So energy deprivation triggers lipolysis, releasing fatty acids and stored lipophilic xenobiotics like organochloride, pesticides, PCBs, dioxins from adipose tissue into circulation, leading to their increased toxicity. There is also impaired protein synthesis and repair mechanisms. Protein and amino acid deficiency compromise synthesis of detoxifying enzymes, transporters, and repair proteins like metallothioneins and antioxidant enzymes. Again, reduced plasma protein binding due to lower albumin levels and other binding proteins can increase the free fraction of xenobiotics in the blood, increasing their adverse effects. There is also the effect of altered gut physiology and microbiota, in which the fruit with deprivation changes intestinal permeability and microbiome composition, and this may increase absorption of some xenobiotics and alter their biotransformation by gut bacteria, potentially increasing formation of toxic metabolites. There is also hypoglycemia and energy depletion. Fasting reduces glucose availability, impairing ATP dependent transport and detoxification. And last but not least, we can see also impaired immune function during malnutrition. Protein energy malnutrition weakens immune defenses, decreasing ability to clear xenobiotics and repair tissue damage, exacerbating toxicity and infection risk. I'm almost finishing. I'm just showing you a drastic example of how fasting malnutrition can increase the toxicity of xenobiotics. This is an example from India. A good portion of people in India, around 480 million, are potentially at high risk of groundwater fluoride and arsenic contamination. Also, a governmental report from India suggested that around 48% of children in India are suffering from malnutrition. And it has been documented that people suffering from malnutrition are more affected by arsenic and fluoride toxicity. You can see here different skin symptoms due to arsenic toxicity, like diffuse melanosis, spotted melanosis, leukomelanosis, tongue melanosis, diffused nodular keratosis on palm, spotted keratinosis in sole, and dorsal keratosis. This is just a drastic example, but I think is a very important one. And this is my last slide. This is a tribute to Theo Colburn, that is not any longer with us. But in the end of 3-day Wingspread conference in 1998, Theo Colburn and other scientists, ethicists and attorneys and activists from the United States, Canada, and Europe articulate what it is called now the precautionary principle. And it is underlined here: an activity raises threats of harm to human health or the environment, precautionary measures should be taken, even if some cause and effect relationships are not fully established scientifically This is a precaution for the future. And with this, I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to any question or discussions you may want to have with me. Hi, Mark. I cannot hear you, Mark.
And now?
Okay, now I can. Yes.
Technology. I'm deeply sorry because I couldn't connect from the place where I am, but now I'm connected. So
No problem.
thank you very much for this excellent presentation. So I have some questions in the chat already. So I have the first question from Christian Blo. I mean, Christian is asking that if this global warming effect and this global warming effect on toxicology or toxic effect, is it the same perception in US and Europe, especially as is US EPA is taking care of it? Is it specific to Europe, or is also US concerned by this global warming and toxicology?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I focused my attention on some effects of climate change in Europe, but obviously this is affecting the world, United States included, and this is an issue that needs to be more discussed. I believe that science must more and more be involved, and scientific evidence must be put in the news. We must have more webinars like this one from others, and also from EPA to increase the awareness, because this is a global problem, not just an European one.
So from Miriam, so nice presentation indeed. That's a tough question. Could uncertainty related to climate change be incorporated into risk assessment?
Yeah, well, yes, of course. We can do it because at laboratory, it's so easy to increase the temperature of in vitro systems or the room temperature where the animals are tested. So we can mimetize easily different temperatures, and if we want to be prepared in the future for effects of xenobiotics, of pharmaceutical drugs that under normal temperature do not induce toxicity, but under hyperthermic stress can lead to toxic effects, probably we should include them in risk assessment as well.
So it means that, as you presented in the beginning of the presentation, I mean, it means that some effect of the drug can be affected by high temperature, for example. Yeah. And so it means that maybe we should put that in some way at one time, maybe in some years in the SPC, maybe in the SPC, we will have to put some sort of a warning of taking this drug in a condition where the heat is present, for example?
Absolutely, Mark. Completely agree with you. We need to think about scientific programs in our congresses leading to this important issue in the future.
And I've got some questions. I was very impressed by your the ecstasy data on the liver.
Yeah.
That was very, very interesting. And so I've got a question. Do you have any idea about the mechanism of this liver effect due to the increase of temperature?
Well, there is the heat stress in the liver is mediated essentially by oxidative stress. And ecstasy leads to an increase in body temperature. It can, in humans, for instance, it can reach 41, 42 degrees in certain cases, and it can lead to that by multi-organ failure within just a few hours. So it's mainly oxidative stress that is involved in these effects. And it's curious that I just showed you the effect in liver, but we tested it for the kidneys, heart, brain, and again we observed the same type of synergic effects. When we increase the temp, for instance, just having an in vitro model and increase the temperature from 37 degrees to 40 degrees, we increase the toxicity of ecstasy and other xenobiotics almost in all experiments we make, which means that by increasing the temperature of cells, tissues, and of the body, you decrease the defenses. Also, you decrease the antioxidant defenses, and you are more exposed to the xenobiotics that are toxic by different mechanisms, but in the end, when you have a decreased antioxidant defense, you are much more exposed to the toxicity.
It means that we should make some, because we have this big rave party with the young kids that are dancing all night, all day. I mean, they are allowed, of course, that's not an issue. But the heat is very high now. Right now, these young people should be aware of taking ecstasy in this condition is not taking ecstasy in condition in April or something like
it's
this.
Very, very dangerous, dangerous. And one thing about ecstasy is that hyperthermia is induced by 4 different mechanisms that are not counteracted by the normal drugs that we use to lower the body temperature. So we cannot lower the temperature with paracetamol or with aspirin. It does not decrease. The only way is to put that person under a cold shower, a cold blanket, or even in a ice water bath to decrease immediately the body temperature, because otherwise that person can die very, very quickly.
So I have a last question. No, there's one more in the chat. Sorry. Could you please, from John, could you please comment on the contribution of scientific activities to climate change? Not sure if you already mentioned this.
Scientific activities, if they can induce you, any activity that leads to the production of greenhouse gases can increase global warming, of course. Yeah. But I do believe that it is the contrary. We as scientists can provide a lot of tools to the world, to the population, by having green chemistry, by by creating ways of decreasing the release of these greenhouse gases. So it's the contrary. I believe that we can contribute by decreasing this climate change.
I have no more question. There is maybe a conclusion by Lucilia. Lucia is saying, okay, it's perhaps an idea for EUROTOX 2027 CEC, risk assessment of chemicals incorporating influence of climate change.
Okay. Very nice proposal, Lucia. Thank you.
So we have to work on that. Yeah. Okay, so thank you again, Félix, for this very nice presentation. There is a lot of congratulations in the chat. And I think it is very interesting to have this kind of presentation that is putting toxicology in a different perspective, okay? And really, we have to think in the future about the influence of the climate. I can see in France this last week, we have some temperature that raise up to 50 degrees, okay?
Wow, that's a lot. That's really a lot.
What I remember in my car, it was said 52
That's
degrees.
too
Okay,
much. Wow.
and so it means that at this temperature, I don't know exactly what you control, and sure, toxicity can be increased by this very high temperature.
Well,
Okay.
yes, I think hydration is important.
Yeah.
And as I showed, people should be well fed, well hydrated,
Hmm.
and avoid as much as possible places where those temperatures are reached. These are not really the places where you should be under 50 degrees in the environment. And also be prepared if you feel that your body is not taking care of the temperature. If you feel that it is the body temperature is increasing, then probably a cold shower can help you in preventing some problems later on.
Yeah, because they were saying in France that probably this heat wave has probably caused more than 1,000 deaths, you see,
Yeah,
in
that's
1 week.
yeah. We are observing this all over.
Yeah.
I saw that in Le Monde. Yeah, I showed
Yeah.
that figures in my presentation. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, Felix. And
Thank
again,
you.
I accept my apologies because
No problem.
I really prepare a presentation of your career, everything. So it's okay.
Good.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you very much, and thank
Thank
you
you
for
very much.
everybody for attending. Okay.